Rain braided silver lines down the windows of La Fenice, a Manhattan restaurant where the floor gleamed like a piano lid and conversations moved in hushed, expensive tones. Haley Williams had been on her feet for 8 hours, and still she carried herself as if the night had merely begun. Apron crisp, ponytail clean, a studied grace that made people underestimate her in the first blink and fear disappointing her in the second. At the corner booth, 3 men in dark suits waited the way wolves did, relaxed but never resting. They rose as another man entered without fanfare. No introductions were needed. Even the room's sound softened as if it recognized a storm front. Francesco Marino didn't dress like old money. He dressed like consequence. Charcoal suit that fit like a secret, leather shoes that didn't need to shine to be noticed, jaw set with the quiet certainty of someone who could move a city block with a phone call. He slid into the booth and scanned the room exactly once. That was all it took to take ownership. Haley approached with a pen poised above her notepad. "Good evening." Still or sparkling? Francesco didn't look up from his phone. "I'll have the financial advice," with a side of sparkling. His men smirked. A few tables away, a hedge fund heir laughed too loudly. The joke, in the way of all lazy cruelty, was easy. Haley didn't flinch. "I'm afraid that's off menu." Her voice was clean glass, polite, uncut. She waited. He kept his eyes on the phone, the flick of a smile at the corner of his mouth, then lifted his gaze and stalled. He'd expected flustered. He met steady. "Fine," he said, as if he hadn't been testing the tide. "But if you were me, where would you put, let's say, $1 million by Friday? Purely entertainment." His men leaned back, enjoying their boss's sport. Haley followed the rules. 1 heartbeat to decide whether to walk away, 2 to choose mercy. She opted for neither. 40% diversified across sustainable energy ETFs in emerging markets. Countries incentivizing infrastructure will beat bloated Western multiples. 30% in mid-cap value with depressed PE ratios due to overcorrection. 20% tax-advantaged municipals laddered over 10 years. 10% liquid for opportunistic buys when fear makes bargains. The smirk on the hedge fund heir curdled. A busboy paused, suddenly remembering an errand. Rain ticked louder against glass. Francesco set his phone down. He studied her the way men like him studied threats. Careful, interested, faintly amused that interest existed at all. Too specific for a guess. Not a guess. She nodded toward the specials card. "Shall I start your table with the burrata?" His second-in-command, Rico, couldn't resist. "What's the angle, sweetheart? TikTok finance?" Haley's pen never wavered. "My mother taught me numbers on a box of laundry powder and a $10 bill. I graduated to balance sheets out of necessity." Francesco's eyes brightened. Barely. "Necessity," he repeated. "Interesting asset class." "Only if you hold it," she said, and it was his turn to still. He gestured at the empty chair. 5 minutes. A glance to the maitre d', a nod answered by a bow. Rules rewrote themselves with the smallest movements. Haley sat, upright, feet flat, as if ready to run. "This is inappropriate." "So was your portfolio breakdown." Calm, faintly amused. "Explain the emerging market angle." "Growth that isn't window dressing," she said. "Real demand. Government incentives that actually bite. Energy usage data that matches reported capacity, unlike certain too-smooth growth curves that shouldn't exist outside marketing decks." Rico chuckled. "She reads footnotes." "Footnotes tell the truth," Haley said softly, "unless someone is paid to change the font." Francesco tipped his head. "And if the truth bites back?" "Then you were overexposed," Haley replied. "And you mistook leverage for genius." Silence collected like velvet. In that moment, he wasn't testing her. He was remembering something he'd seen in a different room, with different men, when a different number had gone the wrong way because someone bet reputation against math. "Your name?" he asked. "Haley Williams." "Francesco," he said, and waited to see if she recognized the weight. She met the name without outward reaction. Only her throat moved once, a swallow, a tiny bell of nerves. He closed the distance not with his body, but with attention. Let's pretend I have people who manage my money while I manage everything else. If your thesis is right, how would you prove it by Sunday? I would pull energy consumption reports against claimed manufacturing capacity for any company promising the moon on a solar panel. If output doesn't match draw, someone is gilding the kilowatts. Then I'd follow the board seats to see who's playing both sides. Rico's smile died first. The third man, Nate, lifted his eyes from the door for the first time. Someone at the bar gulped a martini wrong and coughed. Francesco leaned back. "And what do you want for your trouble, Ms. Williams?" "Nothing," she said, standing, because she knew the cost of favors too well. "Just don't put financial advice on my check." She left before he could set the price. He watched her thread the room with the efficient grace of someone who had learned to carry more than plates. When the espresso arrived, exactly balanced, heat held within a narrow margin, it came with the bill and a $5,000 tip on a $340 tab. Haley stared at the figure long enough to know it was the exact size of a problem she hadn't voiced. She looked up. He wasn't testing her anymore. He was offering a bridge over a river without asking where it led. "I can't accept this," she said. "You can," Francesco said. "And you will." Her jaw tensed. "Under what condition?" "That you answer your phone," he replied, sliding a card across the table. Black, unmarked, the number handwritten. "When I call." Haley held the card as if it might bite. "And if I don't?" Francesco's smile barely touched the air. "Then I'll assume you prefer your current return on pain." Rain gathered itself outside, intent on a longer storm. Haley turned the card over with a thumb, as if checking whether the ink might smear. It didn't. Her phone buzzed in her apron. A denied financial aid email that pulled the floor an inch lower. She felt the hollowness of a bridge you swore you wouldn't cross, and the certainty of a current that would sweep you under. She looked up to return the card and found the booth empty. Only the black rectangle remained. A small, portable door. When her shift ended, she stood in the alley beneath a flickering lamp and dialed the number with a heart that betrayed her pride. It rang once. "Sunday," Francesco said, as if they were continuing a conversation he'd scheduled on a clock only he could see. "Bring what you said you'd bring." "What did I say?" Her voice didn't tremble. Her hand did. "The truth," he said, "and a reason to believe it." The line clicked. Thunder rolled up the river. Haley closed her eyes and understood that her life had turned with a single joke she should have left on the table, until a second vibration rattled her phone. "Rent due tomorrow." "You good?" Her roommate's text waited like a verdict. She slipped the card into her pocket without letting herself think about it again, trying not to ask the question that always came after a miracle that looked like a trap. What if the miracle was the trap? And what if the trap, for once, was the door out? Sunday, 2:59 p.m. The elevator in the Merino building rose so smooth it felt like a held breath. Haley stepped off on the 85th floor, where the Hudson looked like a blade under winter light. The receptionist took Haley's name as if swallowing a pill, then glanced twice at the screen. "You're expected," the woman said, unable to hide surprise. David Rico Romano waited by the glass conference room, tie undone, expression assessing. He opened the door with a flick of 2 fingers. Inside, a wall of screens mapped markets in real time, stocks pulsing like heart monitors, crude oil moving in stubborn increments, currency pairs that tangled and untangled like dancers trading partners mid-step. Francesco stood with sleeves rolled to his forearms. There was a scar near his wrist that didn't match the suit. "You came," he said. "Your tip would cover 2 months of oxygen," Haley replied. "I'm not foolish enough to pretend I don't need air." He nodded once, accepting the bargain phrased as a fairness. "Show me." She had not slept much. She didn't need to. She needed data. On her thrift store laptop, Haley opened a clean spreadsheet, the energy consumption versus reported output cross-check she'd described out loud as a dare to herself. Company A's line was a river that forgot to bend. Company B's growth curve looked like a prayer answered every quarter without variation. Company C's executive board contained a familiar surname, Valenti, that appeared again on a smaller cap table downstream. They're too smooth, she said, enlarging the graphs. Nature doesn't behave like this. Build-outs falter, capacity stutters, power grids hiccup, unless the road is paved in imagination. Rico whistled low. She's saying they're cooking the books. I'm saying they're aligning the pictures, Haley corrected. A real factory has real noise. This is print shop quiet. Francesco watched the overlays with a concentration that altered the air. And the board seat overlap? It's a ring, Haley said, pulling up the Valente name, which lived like ivy across shell companies. Capital flowing through cousins and consulting firms. Someone is feeding a fraud pattern into clean vessels, then selling them to late money who want virtue and yield. He considered her in profile, the way her hands didn't shake because she kept them flat on the table. You speak like someone who has sat on the wrong side of a deal. I've waited tables on the wrong side of a dozen doors, she said. Different language, same weather. He didn't ask again where she learned this. He could see that asking would shut the door she'd cracked. What would you do? He asked. Short the prettiest liar, Haley said, and buy the uglier truth. Rico barked a laugh. She's got poetry. She's got teeth, Francesco said, not looking away from Haley. She finished the summary and waited for rescue or punishment. Instead, he poured coffee, dark as the river. You'll contract here, quietly. Different name if you like it that way. You'll work when you want, from wherever you want, with what you need. Haley's pulse tripped. Is this the part where the room asks for my soul? This is the part where the room asks for your eyes, Francesco said, and where I decide who's been selling painted sunrise to my people. Rico folded his arms. Boss? Francesco didn't turn. I know. What do you know? Haley asked. That if she's right, he said, then someone I shake hands with has been shaking my pockets. He slid a folder across the table. Inside, an NDA, a contractor agreement, compensation numbers that felt like oxygen at sea level. Another page, a line of emergency numbers with no names attached. You'll need a new phone, he said. Use this for anything that touches my office. Haley looked at the sleek device as if it had fangs. I can't sign my life in a room like this. You're not signing your life, Francesco said. Just your work. Your life is your own. Until it's not. A thinner smile. You know how quickly that changes. She did. She signed with slow care, like a person who had been punished for believing words on paper meant the right thing would occur. The pen felt heavier when she laid it down. Good, he said. Let's ruin someone polite. He pivoted to an internal map. Names Haley didn't know, companies she would learn, a charity gala circled on a calendar that made her mouth go dry. Black tuxedo events were fairy tales for people who'd never had to change shoes on a subway platform. What am I looking for? She asked. Cracks, he said. In numbers, in faces, anyone who looks like they're trying to remember where they left a lie. She met his gaze full on, the way she had on the restaurant floor. And what are you looking for, Francesco? Intent, he said. And the man who sold me a sunrise the rain washed off. Their eyes held. Rico cleared his throat. The river moved. Somewhere, a violin on the soundtrack in Haley's mind tucked into a higher key. When she left, a white Maybach idled at the curb. Too obvious, too kind. Her phone buzzed again. Rent paid. For now. Relief softened the sharpness behind her ribs until a second text dented it again. Financial aid. Final denial. The cliff reappeared. She stopped at a newsstand for a coffee she didn't need, just to hold something warm that wasn't complicated. The vendor slipped change into her palm, then closed her fingers around something else. A thin, crisp rectangle slid with the practiced touch of someone used to passing notes in public. She didn't look until she reached the corner. A card. No name. A street address in Brooklyn. On the back, written in careful block letters, "You're asking the wrong questions. Ask why he cares." Haley lifted her eyes and scanned the faces at the crosswalk. No one looked back. The rain started again. Soft, assuming. She tucked the card away. Later, she told herself. After the gala. After she proved that truth had sound and weight. After she learned whether a door could open without snapping shut on her ankle. But who wrote the card, and how did they know which way she would walk? The Marino Foundation Gala turned the old Cunard building into a cathedral of light. Marble columns wore hammered gold. The high blue vault of the ceiling cupped the cautious music of a string quartet like water holding stars. Waiters floated with silver trays as if the floor had been taught not to creak. People spoke the way the wealthy pray, quietly, and only to be overheard by the right saints. Haley Williams entered on Francesco Marino's arm in a midnight gown with clean lines and no apology. A borrowed diamond pin, small, old, certain, anchored her hair. The pin wasn't about sparkle, it was a provenance. He'd pinned it himself in the car with the careful authority of a man who understood how things are marked. "You don't have to pretend," he had said, voice low enough to belong to the leather and the city beyond it. "Just walk. People like us don't ask rooms for permission." She almost asked when she had become people like us. She didn't. When the elevator opened, the room did its small, involuntary hush. The one it saves for power it didn't vote in. He didn't dress like old money. He dressed like consequence. Charcoal suit that fit like a sealed envelope, cufflinks shaped like oaths, a knife sliver tie. 2 men ghosted in his wake. Rico Romano, jacket unbuttoned to advertise that his hands were empty and fast, and Nate, whose eyes counted exits as naturally as other men counted drinks. An elderly patroness in winter pearls reached for Francesco's sleeve. He bent to kiss the air above her hand. "Signora," he said, respectful enough to be remembered, distant enough not to be claimed. Haley felt the room's calculus shift around her, the way attention leaned and then corrected, as if an invisible maitre d' were reseating desire. She kept her breath level. She had carried trays through rooms just like this, gliding along the edge of carpets she couldn't afford to stain. Tonight the carpet held her as if it had been warned. "Smile when you're bored," Rico murmured as a congressman in a heroic tux approached, "and cry where no one can see." "I stopped crying," she said. "Not a boast, just weather." "Good," he said, and moved to intercept a photographer before the lens could decide who she was. Francesco introduced her to no one and to everyone. "A consultant," he told a billionaire whose cufflinks were newer than his marriage. "My eyes," he told a tech founder with teeth too white to be true. He never said her specialty, never offered a last name. In that omission was ownership and protection, a line drawn with a quiet blade. A waiter stumbled near the dais, catching his tray before the glasses sang. Francesco's head turned, expression unchanged, a fraction too quick to be coincidence. Haley felt it then. The net. Not just men and money, the family, the unspoken regal, the silent rituals that kept floors polished and enemies unpredictable. No one here needed to be told what he was. They recognized shape by shadow. Haley's phone gave a tiny, friendly tap against the inside of her wrist. Her scripts were already listening to the building's behavior through legal apertures and less legal ones. Capacity reports, power draw, freight manifests that didn't want to be cousins. Data whispered. The whispers agreed. "Left," she said without moving her mouth, and Francesco's attention slid the way a hawk's does. Nothing wasted. Haley had seen him look at men who owed him, at competitors who smiled like knives. She hadn't seen him look at her the way he did now, like the room had offered a single true line in a sea of ornament. That was when she spotted Enzo Valente. He held his glass the way a guilty man holds a truth, tightly, an inch from breaking. The suit was exquisite, the smile learned, the eyes busy counting exits. The surname had already climbed Haley's spreadsheets like ivy choking brick. Board seats, consultancies, shells that looked like churches from the sidewalk. They started toward him. They didn't part the crowd. The crowd parted them. Halfway across the room, a woman in silver intercepted Haley with a hug that assumed a decade of intimacy and concluded a paragraph of gossip. "Haley?" the woman said, perfume engineered to be remembered by juries and donors. "It is Haley, isn't it?" Haley's lungs forgot when to move. No one had said her name here before. "Do we know each other?" The woman's smile shivered with victory. "Oh, Perhaps I'm mistaken. You just remind me of someone from a firm that burned spectacularly. She had the same inconvenient affection for truth. A glance slid to Francesco's hand at the small of Haley's back. Men with resources do love a challenge. Francesco pressed his palm once against Haley's spine. It wasn't possessive. It was confirmation. I'm here. So are the rules. You're mistaking my consultant for a bedtime story, he said pleasantly. But if you tell me who, I do like endings. The woman's smile broke like bad sugar. I was only making conversation. Then make it elsewhere, he said, without heat and without room for disobedience. As she retreated, Rico drifted by with the inertia of coincidence and repositioned himself between Haley and 3 different cameras. Nate was already speaking into his collar, not loud enough to suggest worry, just precise enough to imply practice. They always try to name you, Francesco said, eyes still on Enzo. Names are levers. I prefer weights. Then let's weigh him, Haley said, and they closed the distance. Enzo, Francesco said, as if they were 2 men on a balcony, not 2 predators measuring blood. Your solar darling is a hit. Even the mayor knows the ticker. Talk is cheap, Enzo answered, grin wide as borrowed land. Returns are not. Fraud is remarkably affordable, Francesco said, silk over wire. Until it isn't. The grin twitched. I don't appreciate. You appreciate yield, Francesco murmured. He leaned in, voice meant only for Enzo and the ghost of a conscience. And you think capacity is a suggestion for men who can afford it. I don't need it to be anything. Sweat gathered at the clean seam of Enzo's collar. It had no business forming in a room this well air-conditioned. A city council member materialized, hand extended, smile pre-polished. Enzo grabbed the lifeline and drifted away on the little raft of small talk. Haley's wrist tapped again. Cross-check complete. On her internal map, Enzo's flagship company glowed the wrong color, reported output outpacing power draw by a clean, consistent 38%. Not a fluctuation. A policy. Generators don't behave like that. Men do. She traced the reports back and the path branched into familiar ugliness. Brackenridge Compliance Partners, a boutique firm that offered the moral equivalent of cologne to men who needed to smell like ethics. Haley's finger paused on a subdirectory named like a joke at a conference. Euphrates. It was nothing. It was everything. The last time she'd seen a project named for a river, it had carried evidence under a city paved with deniability. Francesco, she said, and the word came out thinner than she liked. He saw the pallor shift in her face and adjusted, half a step closer, a fraction of warmth. What is it? Euphrates, she whispered. They reused the pattern. He didn't ask what pattern. He looked at her the way a man looks at the page where the confession should be and isn't, then touched the comms bud. Rico, who in this room would baptize a fraud? Reading lips, Rico murmured. Brennan is here, with donors. William Brennan, compliance priest on weekdays, bagman on weekends. He moved through rooms with a smile that performed benevolence and a Rolodex that performed surgery. Haley watched him incline his head as if blessing an air. The older voice from 100 morning shows, the one who told the city which virtues it could afford this quarter. Music swelled. It should have been triumph. It felt like misdirection. Francesco's phone lit with a single line of text. Do you know who she is? No signature. An origin masked behind 7 mirrors. The screen offered his own face back to him for a second, a man who had not earned this question and would not ignore it. He tilted the phone, let the message die without touching it, and set the device face down on a tray passing by, where it disappeared into an orbit that kept circling him anyway. Haley felt the electric static of a withheld truth. She didn't ask. He didn't lie. Valente just stepped out with Brennan, Nate said, voice cool as glass in his ear. Francesco moved to follow and would have if Haley's fingers hadn't found his sleeve, a reflex faster than decorum. If they see you watching, they'll move the servers, she said, almost without breath. You'll kick in the right door and shake hands with fresh paint. He recalculated mid-stride, the way a man used to drawing maps learns to fold one smaller. What then? Make them think we're clumsy, she said. Offer a partnership. Pretend you're impressed. Men like that live to tour you through the machine that prints money. I don't pretend, he said, a matter of creed. You don't have to, she answered. You're the audience they've been rehearsing for. His mouth tilted. Contempt, amusement, admiration, all in the same spare angle. And you? I go where the numbers sleep, she said, quietly. He never asked how she knew what she knew. He recognized the shape of damage and refused to interrogate it mid-battle. He nodded once. 15 minutes. 12, she countered. You don't know their wires. The smallest smile ghosted his mouth. Go. She turned toward the service corridor, posture relaxed, pulse a drumline. Rico intercepted a staffer with a camera and deleted 3 photos with the effortless charm of a man teaching a stranger to breathe. Nate stepped into the path of a junior politician who wanted a handshake as a souvenir and redirected him to the bar with a sentence that sounded like fate. Haley passed through a door marked staff with a confidence that came from 100 underpaid shifts and 2 lives she didn't own anymore. The corridor hummed in fluorescent sea. Someone had mopped too recently. The floor reflected her like a road at night. Behind her, the ballroom performed Charity. Brennan drifted back in wearing gravitas like a tailored coat. Enzo whispered to a deputy commissioner with the guilty calm of a man who had paid for this whisper in advance. A server with shaky hands dropped a tray, and a glass split against stone, a sudden sharp punctuation. The mayor's wife startled. Francesco was already there, apology wrapped in wit, smoothing what didn't matter to protect what did. Small mess offered up as cover. Do you believe in luck? A donor asked him, foolish enough to try intimacy. I believe in timing, he said, and kept the man exactly far enough away. On a balcony 2 levels above, a single camera lens nested inside a bouquet caught Haley's retreat as a sliver of light against darker light. The hand holding the bouquet did not belong to house security. It belonged to the kind of man who gets paid to notice where doors lead. He tilted the bouquet an inch to track her and then put it back, making a note with a wrist that had broken once and healed wrong. Down the service hall, Haley reached the freight elevator. It arrived with the tired dignity of machines that have carried too much for too long. She stepped inside, pressed 40, and pulled a keycard across a reader that didn't look like a reader unless you wanted it to be. Just before the doors met, the panel blinked, a tiny traitor heartbeat. Her new phone vibrated once. A message slid across the dark. 15 became 10. Move. F. How many alarms could a body hold at once and still move like water? The doors kissed shut. Back on the floor where the champagne was teaching 3 men to confess opinions, Francesco's phone lit again on a passing tray, found its way to his hand, and showed him a second message from the number that had liked questions more than introductions. You're asking the wrong question. Ask why she refuses to be named. He looked up, not at the message, at the room, at Brennan, at Enzo, at the men who smile and make schedules for other people's punishments. Then he looked toward the door where Haley had gone alone, and for a full breath the facade cracked just enough to reveal the ritual underneath, a superstition that men like him learn at altars with candles and mothers. Never let the person you care about walk into a room you haven't blessed. He touched the comm. Nate, eyes on 40. Already there. Rico, if anyone asks where my consultant is. She's none of their business, Rico said, already moving. The quartet rose into something from Vivaldi that felt like a dare. The mayor asked for a photo and didn't get one. Brennan turned, shaken by nothing, and made eye contact with Francesco across 20 feet of polite civilization. He lifted his glass by a centimeter, acknowledgement or threat, and smiled with the endurance of marble. Francesco didn't lift anything. He let the room see him not move. In the elevator's chrome, Haley's reflection steadied. She had walked into enough fires to know which ones had exits. The cab shuddered once like a living thing deciding whether to trust its cables. Floor numbers climbed, 36, 37, 38. The elevator slowed. Between 39 and 40 it hesitated, an intake of breath in a throat made of brass. A shadow crossed the seam of the doors from the other side. It stood very still, as if listening. The panel blinked again. Another false neutral. Haley's hand hovered over the emergency stop, then chose stillness. Sometimes the smallest movement was the biggest answer. Somewhere above her, a bouquet drifted past a security camera that blinked, recording in a red no one was supposed to see. Somewhere below her, a text hopped between towers and fell like a coin into a fountain. "Do you know who she is?" The elevator settled, deciding, for now, to obey. The doors began to open onto a corridor that shouldn't echo and didn't. Light met metal. Cold met breath. Who waited on the other side, and how many names would the next room demand before it believed her silence? The service elevator shuddered once like a living thing and carried Haley to the 40th floor. Carpets muffled secrets. Light fixtures hummed an office hymn. A discreet plaque read, "Brackenridge Compliance Partners," in a font that tried not to exist. The security pass Francesco had arranged worked on the first door, then the second. The third required a code she shouldn't have known. Her hand hovered, then entered it anyway. Muscle memory from an internship interview she'd never received a rejection for. Just silence, then a rumor about someone else who'd been a better fit. Inside, William Brennan's private office smelled like expensive paper and victory. Minimalist desk, deep rug. A locked steel box in the lower drawer, because men like Brennan always kept a shrine to their best lies. Haley knelt and lifted a bobby pin from her hair, grateful and angry at its usefulness. The lock gave like a confession in under a minute. Inside, USB drives, each labeled with what looked like river names and dates. Euphrates, Q4. Her pulse snapped. She slid it into the reader she'd brought and watched a directory sprout branches. Capacity audits, regulatory drafts, payment flows to boards that shouldn't be paid. And there, an audio file labeled Euphrates, call 1211. She nearly didn't click it. Then she did. 2 voices, time-stamped. The first smooth, older. The second younger, brittle with adrenaline. Older man. "She'll ask for the raw data." Younger man. "We'll give it to her, with the edges filed." Older man. "And if she asks why the curve is smooth?" Younger man. "We say we hired better engineers." Older man. "And if she won't be bought?" Younger man. "Then we buy the room around her." Haley's throat closed. There was no name attached, but she knew that cadence like a bruise she'd learned to ignore. She'd heard a version of it in a smaller life when she thought merit cured rot. The extraction program blinked 80% complete. 7 more minutes. Her phone buzzed with a single message. 15 became 10. Move. F. She wiped prints, returned the drives, closed the drawer, and let her breath out in small measured pieces. The elevator dinged down the hall. Footsteps. 2 security guards in conversation. "Boss wants the security report on his desk tonight." "At this hour?" "You know how he is when he smells smoke." They turned the corner and Haley slid behind a column that didn't hide enough. One guard reached for the door handle. The handle started to turn. And somewhere in the building, glass shattered. A shout. A chorus of "oh no" pitched like theater. "Christ," the guard muttered. "That's the ballroom." "Go," the other said. "I'll finish the sweep." Haley counted heartbeats as one pair of footsteps receded. The remaining guard pulled his phone, soothed someone's panic in a low voice, and texted with the deranged cadence of a man trying to look calm while failing. He moved on. Her program chimed 100%. She pulled the drive, wiped the port, closed everything she'd opened, and left the room exactly as the air remembered it. In the ballroom, a server was soaked in champagne and tears while Francesco apologized to the mayor's wife with perfect penance. The mayor's smile, terrible and practiced, forgave him for the spectacle she knew had cost him nothing. Haley re-entered the light from the opposite side she'd left, as taught. Hair and dress unruffled, eyes bright with adrenaline she politely ignored. Mission accomplished, she breathed. Francesco's eyes flickered with the relief he wouldn't show an enemy. Good. They were steps from the exit when Enzo Valente intercepted them, confidence temporarily restored by the crowd. "Leaving so soon?" Enzo said. "I never had the chance to admire your consultant's insights." Francesco's hand touched Haley's elbow. Some men leave a party when it stops being useful. Some men don't recognize that moment until the lights come on. Enzo's grin returned, smaller. We should talk, Francesco. The Euphrates flows strong this quarter. Haley's stomach dropped into the floor. He said it on purpose. He was daring her to flinch. She did not. Rivers flood, Francesco said mildly. And floods ruin furniture. Enzo's eyes sharpened as he clocked the non-reaction and didn't know where to put it. We'll be in touch. They reached the car. The city moved like a living machine. Inside the Maybach, Haley opened her clutch with fingers that didn't shake and placed the extraction device on the seat between them as if it were a live animal that had chosen not to bite. What's on it? He asked. Enough to make someone sleep badly, she said. Maybe enough to wake a prosecutor. Prosecutors sleep badly when they owe the wrong favors, he said, dry. She turned to him. Then we use the court that doesn't take bribes. And which court is that? He asked, genuinely curious. The one with math, she said. For the first time that night, he laughed. A surprised, delighted sound that made the car feel smaller and warmer. Back at the office, Rico and Nate waited with a team whose names Haley wouldn't be told yet. The extraction spilled across screens. Emails between Brennan and a regulatory aide whose ethics had a price. Board minutes that referenced adjustments to align investor expectations. Payment schedules routed through clean non-profits for dirty reasons. Then the audio played, and even the men who'd learned to keep faces still looked at the speakers like they'd just heard a ghost sing. Can you enhance it? Francesco asked, eyes narrowed. Already cleaning, Nate said. A tech ran a filter. The older voice crackled into clearer profile. It was a voice men lined up to smile at in daylight, the unassailable older statesman of philanthropy who judged young entrepreneurs on breakfast panels and funded scholarships with one hand while moving money with the other. When the cleaned clip finished, no one spoke. Haley watched Francesco hear the line by the room around her and knew a decision had been made inside him that would not be unmade. Who sent the text? She asked quietly. He glanced at her. What text? She held his gaze. The one asking if you know who I am. Rico's eyes flicked between them. Nate looked away, respectful. Francesco didn't blink. I get plenty of texts from cowards, he said. Their handwriting changes. Their fear does not. She accepted the dodge because she was not ready to answer the implicit question in reverse. There was a card, she admitted. Someone slid it to me at a newsstand. It said I was asking the wrong questions. What are the right ones? He asked. Why you care, she said. He looked at the river of evidence moving across the screens, then at her. Because the truth owes me nothing, he said, and I owe it a rude awakening. He didn't add the part neither of them could name yet. Because you remind me that I haven't given up admiring people who refuse to drown. The tech turned from the console, pale. There's more, he said. An internal security flag popped when we touched the Euphrates tree. Someone on the other side saw a handshake they didn't expect. Can they trace it here? Rico asked. Unlikely, but they'll know someone is looking. Francesco's jaw set. Then we make them look back, where we want. How? Haley asked. He met her eyes. We accept a partnership, he said softly, and we write the terms. Her chest tightened. You're going to walk into their office. I'm going to invite them into mine, he said. And while they're admiring the art, we'll follow the pipes back to the river mouth. Haley imagined a doorway opening and closing on fingers. We do this my way, she said. No bravado, no heroics. If any part smells wrong, we burn the plan and walk. Francesco inclined his head. Your way, he agreed. With my teeth. He offered his hand then. Business formal, not a promise, not yet. She put her palm against his and felt the warm, human shock of contact, the unprofessional desire to hold on when she was supposed to let go. She pulled back first because she had learned to. The text console chimed again. A new alert blinked in harsh red. Incoming meeting request. Brennan, Valente, tomorrow 2 p.m. They were quick, they were confident, they were coming. And someone, somewhere, was writing a message in block letters and sliding it toward a different hand. Will the door we open be the one we can close? The next day, Brennan arrived at the Marino offices with Enzo Valenti half a step behind and a junior lawyer whose eyes moved like loose change in a coat pocket. He brought charm, penitent humility, and a proposal printed on thick paper that wanted to smell like money. Francesco received them not at the long conference table, but at a seating area with a view. He offered espresso that Brennan declined because he preferred tea, which they did not have. "We like common cause," Brennan began, every syllable polished. "We admire your foundation's work. We believe in green growth that lifts all boats." "Boats sink when you fill them with wishful thinking," Francesco said pleasantly. Brennan's smile didn't dim. "Which is why we have compliance." From the monitoring room behind the mirrored glass, Haley listened through a discreet headset, eyes moving between the live feed and the contract her team was tearing apart on screen. She marked the clauses that presupposed system access for technical due diligence. The access flowed one way, into Marino servers, under a pretense Brennan's lawyer had crafted to seem inevitable. "It's a data mining trap," she told Nate, who sat beside her. "They want our models, our client list, our keys. They'll take a copy while praising our foresight." Nate nodded, alert to her cadence. "Can we make that tunnel go both ways?" "We make a sandbox that looks like our house," Haley said, "and wire it for sound." On the floor, Brennan shifted to soft intimidation. "We do try to avoid misunderstandings in public, Mr. Marino. Our friends in City Hall appreciate partnerships that keep jobs safe." Francesco smiled as if the weather pleased him. "I have friends too." "Frenemies, then," Enzo muttered, attempting levity. Brennan shot him a warning with his lashes. Francesco leafed through the proposal as if tasting a wine. "Fine," he said. "Let's pilot. Minimal data share, tight scope. My team will tailor the access." Brennan's jaw moved, hidden under a pleasant beard. "Of course," he said, voice frictionless. "We're flexible." They weren't, but they could pretend while they looked for a second door. When they left, Francesco walked to the mirrored glass and saw only himself. "Well?" Haley stepped out of the shadow and felt the room tilt as Brennan's cologne faded. "They're greedy," she said, "and patient." "Which one is more dangerous?" he asked. "Patience," she said quietly. "Greed is loud. Patience is a watch." He considered that as if turning the idea in his mouth. "Then we teach their watch to tell our time." The next 48 hours were a ballet of code and misdirection. Haley and the tech team built a honeypot, a simulation of Marino's internal systems that looked authentic from 30 feet and lied at 3. The sandbox contained markers that responded only to Euphrates pattern queries. Touch the river, and the river lit. Francesco took calls with partners and held meetings that meant less than the pauses between sentences. He slept on the very edge of sleep. When hunger came, he forgot to let it in. And always, somewhere behind his eyes, Haley's profile made a shape he couldn't file under business. At night, she went back to her tiny apartment where the fridge hummed louder than the building and read and reread the newsstand card. Why he cares. The question felt less like suspicion now and more like a dare to believe the simplest answer. Because some men care for reasons they can't say out loud without giving something away. On the third day, the pipe sang. A ping in the sandbox triggered their alert. Brennan's team had connected under the limited scope, which Haley had designed to look generous while providing nothing Marino couldn't afford to lose. As predicted, they immediately probed beyond the agreed endpoints, sniffing for a door into trading models and client rosters. "Hello, Euphrates," Nate murmured. "Don't chase," Haley warned. "Watch, learn their handshake, then shake back." In the next hour, the pattern repeated. Curated, careful. Brennan's people were seasoned thieves dressed as auditors. But thieves grew confident when new rooms obeyed old maps. Then someone on Brennan's side made a mistake, small as a single keystroke that called a deprecated function mapped to a legacy internal ID, a ghost tag that exposed the machine on their side for a fraction of a second. Nate swore softly. Haley's fingers flew. She pulled down the machine certificate, traced it to a subnet in a building Brennan didn't list on any brochure, Brackenridge Annex, 47th and 10th. and captured a time window when the machine updated from a local repository. Every update was a mirror. Every mirror showed the room behind the mirror if you angled it right. "Got you," Haley whispered, and felt something like the old her, the analyst, turn in the light. They had the doorway, the schedule, and the partial map. They didn't have the key. Francesco stepped beside her, near enough that his presence adjusted the oxygen. "How bad do we need inside?" he asked. "Bad," she said. "Not permanently. Just long enough to copy the vault." Copying the vault wasn't theft the way a man in a ski mask understood the word. It was proof of crimes too careful to leave bloody fingerprints. It was also dangerous enough to make other people decide whether Haley lived out the month. "No heroics," he said. "And no half measures," she replied. He nodded. "I'll make a mess at street level." She turned to him. "What kind of mess?" "The kind that makes everyone stare out the front window," he said, "while we walk in the back." 2 nights later, a water main break flooded 10th Avenue in cinematic fashion. Sirens, orange cones, angry men in bright vests shouting schedules into radios. Brackenridge Annex bled interns onto the sidewalk while a building manager argued with a city inspector who hadn't returned his call since 2019. Haley, in a maintenance jacket and ponytail under a cap, walked through the service entrance with a clipboard and a pass that worked because someone in the building believed clipboards were honest. Nate kept eyes on cameras. Rico paid a man who knew where hallways ended. The server room was colder than mercy. Haley's hands moved over ports and cables like a pianist sight-reading grief. The extractor hummed. The room hummed back. Her heart counted seconds badly. Footsteps in the hall. A muffled complaint about boots. The handle twitched. She froze. Outside, a voice she recognized from the audio said, "If the building's underwater, why do we still have to work?" A second voice laughed, low and cruel. "Because money doesn't drown." The door didn't open. When the extractor beeped complete, Haley pulled it, wiped the contact, and closed the cabinet with the same breath. She left past a janitor who nodded at her like they'd worked nights together for years. Back in the car, the device sat between her and Francesco, small enough to lose and heavy enough to dent a life. She looked at it, and then at him. "Why do you care?" she asked, the card finally asked aloud. His eyes didn't move from the road. "Because someone tried to buy the room around you," he said. "And in this city I own too many rooms to let that work." It wasn't the whole truth. It was the part he could say. It was enough for now. At the office, the files opened into architecture. Emails that named payments for cooperation, drafts of regulatory memos edited in red by a hand the public believed incorruptible, and in the middle of the heap, a file that didn't belong, Williams' PDF. Francesco felt the world tilt. Haley's name flickered on the screen in letters that had no right sitting in that directory. He looked at her, and she, finally, quietly, nodded. "That's me," she said. Rico's eyes sharpened. Nate swore softly. No one moved closer to the screen because reverence, like fear, creates space. Francesco opened the file. A dossier. Not just numbers, addresses, former roommates, college transcripts, a photo taken 2 years ago outside a diner in Queens where Haley had worked breakfast in winter. At the bottom, a note. "If she reappears, neutralize." He tasted iron. "Who did this to you?" "I used to believe in the market," Haley said, voice level because practice made perfect. "I found a pattern I wasn't supposed to. They erased me and put my name in a file cabinet labeled if necessary." "Necessary for what?" Rico asked, already knowing. "To keep the river smooth," she said. "With a body in it." Francesco closed the file with a care that looked like fury dressed for dinner. He touched the comm in his ear. "Get me every lawyer who owes me a favor," he said, "and 3 who don't." "On it," Nate said. Francesco turned to Haley. There was a rule he'd never broken. Don't promise what timing might steal. He broke it anyway. "You are with me now," he said simply. "They will not touch you, not while I'm breathing." The air in the room changed. Buildings have heard vows before. Some they believe, some they test. The extractor dinged again, a small bell interrupting a prayer. Another file surfaced, tagged with a date 3 days from now and a subject line, Containment. "Read it," Haley said. Nate's lips moved as he scanned. "They're scheduling a visit to the Marino offices," he said, voice flattening. "Not to talk, to plant something that looks like a crime." Francesco's gaze went arctic. "Then we don't just prove them dirty," he said. "We prove they tried to dirty us." "And we show it to the city," Haley said. "And the country," he replied. They were still building the plan when the building PA chimed with an event no one expected. Fire alarm, real smoke in a stairwell that shouldn't have had a cigarette near it. The floor began to move, practiced, controlled. The extraction rig sat blinking on the desk, full of everything and glowing like temptation. "Go," Francesco told his team. "Francesco," Haley started. He motioned her to the door. "We leave it," he said. "If they get into the room, they find nothing." He tapped the safe in the wall with 3 fingers. A panel slid 2 inches open, enough to swallow the drive in a heartbeat. The stairwell smelled like damp metal and glue. Haley's hand found the rail, cold under her palm. They descended step by orderly step until a man in a maintenance jacket rounded the landing below and looked up at her with recognition he tried to hide. He smiled with block letters in his eyes. "Ms. Williams," he said pleasantly, voice the calm of a person who has practiced it. "Do you have a moment to talk about containment?" Francesco moved before the man could finish the word. Rico moved faster. The landing became a box with a single language. The fire alarm screamed approval. Somewhere in the building, a camera watched a story write itself. Who pulled the alarm, and who planned to finish what a file had scheduled 3 days from now. The maintenance man didn't get a second sentence. He reached for his pocket, and a hand met his wrist with a speed that would have broken bone if Francesco had chosen bone. He chose tendons instead. The man's knees hit the landing with a metallic clatter. Rico removed a phone from the jacket with the indifference of a person doing laundry. "Call it," Francesco said, voice low. Nate, 2 floors above, had already pulled building security into a loop that routed through their own system. The maintenance badge lit red on a control screen. The name wasn't his. The photo was someone else's. Brennan had sent a man wearing city clothes. "Police?" Rico asked. "Not yet," Francesco said. "He'll say we lured him." He looked at the man. "Who told you containment was on today's schedule?" The man's mouth smiled while his eyes asked for a softer world. "I like your building," he said. "It has pretty alarms." Haley didn't realize she'd stepped closer until the man's gaze snapped to her, triumphant. "There she is," he crooned. "The variable." Francesco's body made a small move that meant violence later. Haley held up a hand. "This is the part where you tell me I can't win," she said. "Right before you lose the file naming all your friends." The man's smile finally faltered. "What file?" "The one where you plan to install evidence on our network," she said. "Bad plan, worse execution. Your deprecated call exposed your machine. We have your map." For the first time, the man looked afraid. It made him ordinary. Rico leaned in, amused. "Tell Brennan," he said softly, in a voice made for promises you hope you can keep, "that the river he built runs backward now." And they delivered the man to a security office they controlled more than the city did, with paperwork that would exist when scrutiny required it. When the alarm cleared, the floor returned to its desks as if nothing had tried to burn. The next hours became a court of their own design. Lawyers assembled in the conference room with faces that understood mess. Journalists Haley trusted from a distance were given time-stamped snippets, enough to start calling fact. A U.S. attorney who owed Francesco a favor from a different life returned a call on the first ring. Brennan's office called to reschedule a follow-up. Francesco's assistant replied with polite ice, "We're assembling a joint statement. Your presence will be welcome." Brennan didn't answer. He sent a different man with a bouquet of regret at an hour when decent people slept. The doorman at the Marino building turned him away without asking permission. On the 5th day of the week that had shifted a city's temperature, the story broke. not in a blog that could be bought or a station that could be pressured, but in a paper that liked records. The article didn't speculate. It published audio of "Buy the room around her." Emails excised of deniability. Euphrates set out in increments the public could follow without a degree. Everyone who'd shaken Brennan's hand scrambled to remember where their other hand had been. Valente issued a statement about being misled by vendors. The mayor pledged a task force that would produce a schedule. That afternoon, a black car without plates parked across from the Marino building and didn't leave. Haley watched it from an interior room with one window and took a breath that didn't calm anything. "They won't try here," Rico said. "They'll try where I sleep," Haley said. Francesco shook his head. "You'll sleep here." He'd said it as an option before. He said it now, like policy. She wanted to argue on principle. The look in his eyes moved the argument into a place called later, if you must, but not now. The guest suite was quiet and expensive without being cruel. She showered the day off and put on one of the t-shirts folded in the drawer. Their existence felt like the strangest kindness. Then stepped barefoot into the kitchen where Francesco stood in shirt sleeves making coffee as if the world hadn't rung alarms for 5 days. His forearms were the kind that carried weight without complaint. A small scar by the wrist caught the light and told a story she didn't ask to hear yet. "Insomnia?" he said without turning. "Graduating from it," she said. He turned then. The room, idiotically, forgot it had seen him before. "Do you miss it?" he asked. "The old future you planned?" It was the first raw question he'd asked that hadn't been about a file. "I miss the girl who believed work was a spell that turned bad men into honest ones," she said. "She was sweet and stupid. She was good," he said, "and she learned." He brought her a mug, fingers brushing hers long enough to make the air do that shifting thing again. She breathed coffee and him and steadiness. It had been a long time since steadiness had smelled like a person. They didn't kiss then. They took a step into a silence that didn't feel empty. Words would spoil it. Heat would name it too soon. Sleep finally arrived like an apology. In the morning, the world continued its new habit. Brennan indicted. Enzo flown to Miami and caught in a photo with sunglasses and no comment. The U.S. attorney held a podium with names as if they were coordinates. The older voice from the audio lost 3 board seats in under an hour and gained a lawyer famous for delaying the inevitable. Haley watched it happen, not trusting it, then trusting it enough to let a breath travel all the way to the bottom of her lungs. She turned to find Francesco at the glass, looking at a city that had been his battlefield and his inheritance. "You did it," she said. "We did something," he replied, "and the river found the ocean." She set the mug down and closed the distance because progress deserved contact. She kissed him first, slowly, as if learning a language she'd secretly spoken for months. He responded with the patience of a man who had taught himself not to want what he could not protect. When they drew apart, she rested her forehead against his and laughed, quiet. "I thought I would never believe in rooms again," she said. "And here I am in one that didn't try to buy me." He smiled, real and young around the edges. "This room is yours," he said. The doorbell rang. Rico opened it and admitted a courier with a brown envelope and a face that wanted to be elsewhere. The envelope carried no return address, only a handwritten H on the flap. Haley broke the seal. Inside, the newsstand card, returned. And beneath it, a single printed photo from a camera that preferred corners. Haley leaving her Queen's Diner 2 winters ago, a man across the street watching with a phone held chest high. On the back, "You chose the right question. Now ask who wants the answer." The room chilled. Francesco's jaw flexed. "Brennan's people?" he asked. Haley shook her head. "No. This is neater." Her phone buzzed before fear could settle into furniture. An unknown number. She put it on speaker. A voice with a layered accent, Midwestern vowels wrapped around East Coast consonants, filled the kitchen. "Congratulations," the caller said. "You overturned the table. Now do you know who said it?" Francesco's eyes went black in a way that meant nothing to do with color. "Name yourself." "Names are rent-controlled," the voice said, amused. "Let's save them, Ms." Williams, you made enemies when you proved you could swim. Some of them aren't done building rivers. Silence. Breathing. The city outside. Uninterested. I'll send a list, the voice continued. Not out of charity, out of alignment. We both dislike men who think rooms belong to them. A pause. One last thing. Don't mistake the man beside you for the rooms he owns. Sometimes the owner hates the wallpaper. The line clicked dead. Rico swore. Nate, on the intercom, requested permission to break several laws with style. Francesco spoke last. We find him, he said. Haley folded the note in half, then in half again, like containing a thing shrank it. We find them, she corrected. Because this isn't one man. It never is. Francesco nodded. Then we build a bigger room. She looked at him, at the man who had joked about financial advice and found himself asking for more than money. The man who had decided to care at the exact moment the world wished he wouldn't. Together, she said. Together, he answered. They stood side by side, not as savior and saved, but as partners who had learned each other's languages. His of teeth, hers of truth, and the one they invented that braided both into future. Outside, the river kept moving, obedient to gravity, indifferent to names. Inside, two people chose a direction and a speed. The elevator chimed down the hall. A new file opened on the screen with a subject line that felt like a drumbeat. Project, Harbor, Phase 1. The cursor blinked. Who sent the file, and what will it cost to open it? If you enjoy stories like this, take a moment to subscribe to the channel. That's how I'll know you truly liked it. Even if you're watching on your TV, grab a second to join this family of fans who love emotional and heartfelt stories. Your support means everything, and it helps us bring you even more tales like this one.